Hello and welcome back to Spirit of Nature Art and episode 4 of our Curious Birds Altered Lapbook. This is where we got to last time, but look, we have got so many more pages still to go, and we are going to focus on this side here this time, because last time we created that book within a book that gave us a really nice steady spine for our closure. Now this side on flops in, there we go. So we need to put something on that side to be able to give that same kind of structure. So I thought we'd put something here, and I thought we'd bring in the other half of that book cover that we used last time. So this book that had completely fallen apart. And you know, this last couple of weeks I have been tidying. I have been going through my messy cupboard. Please tell me we all have one of those. And in there is one of those kind of concertina file folders with a whole load of paperwork in that mostly needed to be thrown away. But it's kind of inspired me a little bit. I kind of thought how fun it would be to have a little bit of a concertina kind of folder in our lapbook. So I have just measured up this book cover, and I am just going to cut it down to size. Now, I don't want to cut the whole thing, just like with the previous page. I want to just cut through as far as the canvas so we can fold it around and create a nice neat edge. So I've just used my scalpel to cut through as much of that card as possible and just kind of cleaning that up a bit so that we've just mostly got the canvas that we can wrap back round on the book. So we've got, now we're going to do the length so we can get that the right size as well. So just cutting through until I can get through as much of that card as possible, then tearing that away and tidying it up a little bit with my scalpel. So now we've got this extra kind of flappy bit here that we can put around, and I want to create that kind of spine at the bottom to match the one at the side, so it gives it that structure. So I'm just going to sort of measure that up. Now we've got that in situ, because obviously we've got to account for the thickness of the card and the cover and things. So just putting that in place and then measuring it up means I'm more likely to get a much more accurate size of that spine that we want at the bottom. So I have measured that up, and what I'm going to do, I'm not using my scalpel here, what I'm about to do is use a scoring tool to score that line on the inside of that kind of flap that we've got left. So there's a little bit of card left on there still, and then the canvas. So just scoring that line there so we can fold that and create that spine that will go along the bottom of our book here and create that structure that we need to keep that side spine open so that the book can close properly. Now I know I've just taken all of the card out, but I want to put a little bit back in there just to give that spine a little bit more sturdiness. So a little bit of Greyboard that I'm just going to cut and place in there just so it's a bit more sturdy than if it was just that canvas. And now I need to get rid of all the excess. So I'm just going to mitre these corners so that it's easier for us to fold this back in. So essentially we need to wrap this cover up, and we want to just take away as much excess as possible. So just figuring out where all those little pieces are going to fold in and mitring them. Remember when you're mitering not to go right up against the edge, just leave maybe like a mil or so that when you fold it in, you haven't got bare corners on your Greyboard underneath. And there's still quite a lot there, so I'm going to cut that excess off so it doesn't interfere with whatever we do next, because I'm sort of still making this up. I have an idea, not 100% sure how I'm going to do it, but let's get this cover done first. So I kind of thought that I would use these file folders. These are quite cheap ones. They're kind of almost like craft cardstock. And I am just kind of measuring up the length that I want these to be. Now, because I'm creating this concertina effect, what I want to do is to measure the exact length I want it to be, and then I want to add on a little bit more so that I can create the flaps at each side that will enable me to fit the concertina in place. So I'll show you what I mean in a second. So I'm just cutting this down to the right height. Now this card's quite floppy, so I've decided to use 2 pieces of it. So I'm just using the fold along the top of the file folder. And as you can see, I've just scored like I think that's 1 mark on the scoreboard, and then mitered. And now, because I've mitered it, I can fold them both back on either side. So let me show you that again. So I am going to, that's the length that I want it to be at the end, like that. So I want it to fit inside that cover like that. So that mark, first mark that I've just made is the finished length. And then I'm just going to pull that down and I'm going to add enough width for 2 scores on one on either side. So now I'm just cutting it down to the depth that I want it to be, so it fits in that cover. And now I'm just going to, it's actually 2 marks on the scoreboard. I think that's 1/4 inch, I think. So mitering and then folding back those score lines so that we now have these little flaps that we can use, there we go, to be able to attach our concertina style. So now I need to create the kind of concertina-y bit. So I'm just going to cut this the same height as the pages. And I'm not sure how many pages I'm going to need to fit in here yet, so I'm kind of just going to keep scoring until this piece of card is finished. And I'm doing the scores the same size as the flap scores. So 1/4 inch, 2 of those little notches, and I'm going to do this whole piece. I might not need this much, but I'd rather have too much and cut it off. So folding this back and forward, so we have that little concertina like that. So I've got 2 now, and I've got my 5 pages, and these little concertinas need to go one either side of the book. So I'm just going to ink these up now. It's easier whilst they're not attached. And then on that outside piece there, I'm just going to add a bit of double-sided tape. Just burnish that down. Take the backing off. A little bit of that HiTack glue, so we've got some wiggle room. We can move it around if we need to. Remembering that we want to keep the inked bit on the outside because that's the bit we're going to see. And just getting this in position so it's nice and straight. Same on the other side. Piece of double-sided tape. A little bit of the HiTack glue on top of that tape once we've taken the backing off. And then I want to line this up, not just with that straight edge that the glue bit is going to go on, but I want to make sure this is lined up with the concertina on the other side as well, so that the pages all go in straight. So just kind of bringing the 2 back together into the middle there so I can make sure that they are lined up in exactly the same position. And now this is where those little flaps on each of those pages come in. So we're going to put double-sided tape on all 4 of those flaps. So just following the mitre on there as well. Now, like I said, the only reason I've folded this piece in half is because the card's a little bit floppy. So you can see here that that's still open. You don't need to do that, but I thought double thickness would give me a little bit more sturdiness. So if you've got thicker card, don't worry about that. But just getting tape on all 4 of those flaps. And this is how we are going to stick this into the concertina. Now, if you folded like me, make sure that your fold is at the top so that you've got that nice finished edge when you're looking down into your pocket and you're not going to accidentally create another pocket. So burnishing that down, taking off the double-sided tape on one side, put some HiTack glue on, and then I am just, excuse my head, I'm just wanting to position that in so that I can fold that concertina back in. So I want to make sure it's not interfering with that fold. So same on the other side, take that backing tape off and just allow that to sit in that fold. And now we can take the backing tape off the top part and that next fold will come in like that and stick to that bit. Same on this side, take the piece off, bit of HiTack glue and fold that in. And now we've got our first little pocket in. This one's quite narrow because it's going onto the cover. And now we just repeat. So we take the double-sided tape off the back piece first, stick that down, fold the concertina back on it, make sure it's lined up and straight, and then the same on the other side. Put it in place nice and neat and straight, and then fold that concertina back in and just keep going until you've got the number of pages in that you need. Just make sure your concertina doesn't wander out. So you kind of want to make sure you keep folding it in and it's staying kind of at 90 degrees. So excuse my head from keeping on poking in, but I'm trying to make sure that everything is lined up and straight and that that concertina isn't sort of starting to come out wider than the cover. So just always bringing that back in like that so I can make sure it's nice and straight at the sides. And having that bit of HiTack glue on means that if it's not in place, you can move it around until it is. There we go. You can see that concertina starting to form there. And then just carrying on the same thing. Just keep folding the next concertina in until all of your pockets are done. Like this. There we go. Now I've got too many bits and pieces at the back. I've got too many flaps, but I don't think I'm going to need them because looking at that as it is, it looks deep enough. Now I had originally thought that I'd create this like a with a almost like a satchel kind of lid coming round over it, like you do with the boxes that you buy, the concertina boxes. But as I had all these offcuts lying around from creating those pages there, I kind of realised I had all these little mini file folder cards. So I cut them down to size so that each of those will fit in one of those pockets like that. And they fitted in really nicely, so they didn't fall out when the book was moving. So I thought, do you know what, I'm not going to put a kind of a closure on this. I'm going to keep it open with all those file folder cards. So back to my fussy cut pile, and this lovely eagle really stood out to me. He looks so super intelligent. He's definitely going to have a file folder with lots of paperwork in. And just playing around now with some of my, I think these are Tracy Fox digitals. And I found this wonderful one that actually said eagle on it. So I had to use that one. So stuck that down to my book plate, and now I'm just kind of poking some holes through the book plate and add some brads in there just to get a little bit more detail. I've added in a couple of, I think this is one of my homemade Currator, Tim Holtz Currator stamps here, and some of those number strips from Tracy Fox as well. So just starting to create a little mini collage with those, so that this cover here fits with the rest of the design of the book that we've already done. So it's time to stick Mr. Eagle down, and I just want to make sure that he lines up properly with the bottom there, so that he's not floating. Getting all these little bits stuck down. And then you can see on the back of that book plate there, when I just pushing those brad legs down, but remember with your brad legs, you know, they're flexible, so you can bend them in so that they're not sticking out of the side of your piece. So just sticking that down there. And then I had this idea that I wanted to put an eyelet up in that top corner. So I got out one of those nice big kind of eyelets, and had I thought about this beforehand, I would have punched this earlier, but now it's all together, I can't get the crocodile in. So out with my cutting mat and my pokey tool, and I'm just going to poke that hole manually. So just kind of keeping on poking and wiggling that around until that eyelet will fit in. This is where hindsight's a wonderful thing. But my crocodile will fit in that little bit there to be able to squeeze that eyelet shut. There. I'm really pleased with how that is looking as a piece that's going to go into the book. So now I can take my attention to those file folder cards that are going to go inside. So I've pulled out some tea dye paper as well as some more of the Curious Birds from the Collage Superbook. And I am just playing around with putting this all together. So I love this tea dye paper that I've got here is just straight out of a notebook. So I love the kind of the bit at the side where the spiral bound was bit. And I found this dictionary of quotes we have an old telephone box in our village that's a book swap. So I found that in there this week, so I thought that might be quite fun to bring that in as well. Some of those quotes peeking out from behind our Curious Birds, because some of those quotes were pretty curious as well, I can tell you. So just sticking down these two background pages and now starting to think about how I'm going to collage the bird onto there. Inking around the edges again as well, so it matches with the rest of the book we've been working on, and bringing out all my little digitals, the number strips, the Tracy Fox, the Currator snippets, and just inking those up and playing around with how they look to create a bit of a collage on the page, just a bit more interest and help our bird settle onto the page as well, so he's not just sat there kind of really stark against the background. He's a bit too long for the page as well, so I'm just trimming the bottom off. And I want to add a little something into his pocket, again, to mirror what we've done with some of the other birds in the book so far. So using some of these little Tracy Fox number strips, just to make it look like he's got some pamphlets in his pocket. That piece doesn't quite fit in, so I'm just going to lengthen that cut. Sorry, my head keeps poking into the video. Just trying to position myself so I can see what I'm doing properly. There we go, so sticking those little bits down so it looks like he's got them in his pocket. And cutting off the excess before we're ready to stick him down to the page as well. Last little snippet in the corner there. And now he's stuck down. I just want to add a little bit of background stamping. Again, just to really give it this kind of aged, kind of vintage look. So I've got these fab splatter stamps, and I'm just going to stick with the tea dye Oxide. I don't really want these standing out too much on the page, just that kind of sense of a little something in the background there. And just having some fun playing around with some stamping. This stamp set will be in my Amazon shop, I think. I'll make sure it is by the time this video goes live. And then this little Paper Artsy Minis splatter stamp, just to kind of really make those kind of bigger splatters look like they've properly splattered on the page. So now I'm going to back this whole piece on some tea dye paper, so we've got a really nice kind of area for journaling on the back as well as the front there, and edging all of that with the same two Oxides, the Vintage Photo and the Ground Espresso. Back with a crocodile to add an eyelet into that top corner. These eyelets come with like a little washer that goes on the back, which just makes the whole thing even more fiddly because they tend to have a mind of their own. And look, there we go, falls off. There we go. I'm really pleased with how that is looking. So now I need to make some more to go in the rest of the pockets, but I want something to go in that eyelet. So I've just got a bit of fabric here. It's just a bit of cotton something, no idea where it came from. So I'm just kind of getting it inked up with that Oxide vintage photo just by smooshing it on the mat and a bit of water. And once that's dry, I'm just bringing in some, so this is a VersaFine Clair ink. I think this is Fallen Leaves. So this is an archival ink rather than a distress ink, just to get a nice crisp kind of print on the fabric. So I'm not inking up the whole of that stamp, I'm just inking up partial areas of it that I like, the kind of like the numbers and the lines. So just using part of those stamps just to create these little strips of fabric that I can put through those eyelets on those file folder cards. So just trimming those down, and I'm just going to thread that through the eyelet. And I was going to put a Tim Holtz tiny attacher stapler through there, but I couldn't find it. So in the absence of that, I'm just going to put a drop of glue there just to stick those two pieces together, so it becomes a nice little kind of pull tag so that we can get them in and out of the file folder nice and easily. So here are the 5 cards that I've made with all those wonderful vintage birds. And now I sort of realised that I quite like the idea of something hanging out of that eyelet that I put there. When I put the eyelet there, I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but I remembered this bit of spine that fell off the original book. So it's just a bit of canvas with the kind of gold printing on it. And so I thought, and you could see how easy that was to tear because the canvas is so old. And because it is a little bit delicate, I just backed it on a bit of tea dye paper, inked it up, and then I'm just poking a hole through to put a brad in so that that just sits on the front there, another piece of that book. You can see I've added another raven onto the background there, who's going to be poking out of our file folder. I've put double-sided tape on those flaps at the back of the file folder, and I'm just adding some HiTack glue to it for extra stickiness and a bit of wiggle room. And I'm just going to stick that down on that very back page there and place each of those journaling cards inside our lovely concertina file. I'm so happy with this. I mean, you can see how that front spine no longer flaps in. And this, I love how this really fits with the book cover that we used on the other side in the last episode as well. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it's given you some inspiration, and I have no idea what we're going to be doing next. Join me next time where we will both discover what comes next in the Curious Birds Altered Lapbook.